You're probably here because you've just got a camera and you have absolutely no idea what to do. You've got it out, you go through all these settings, all these buttons, and you just have absolutely no clue. You've gone onto the internet, you've read all the blog posts, you've read all the articles, and still it's just not going in here. Don't worry. I was exactly the same a couple of years ago. It took me quite a while to understand what each component meant, what each word meant, and how they kind of fit together. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go all the way back to the basics so that when you pick up your camera, you can feel more confident about what your settings you are choosing and what you need to be doing to getting the shots that you actually want. So, take a cup of tea, for example, my favorite beverage. I need it every morning to kind of focus on work. So in here is just a simple black tea, just water and tea, nothing else in there. And if we take a sip, it's pretty bad. I know a lot of people will drink tea black and with no sugar or anything, but that is pretty awful. So let's go ahead and call this black cup of tea the shutter speed. Shutter speed is essentially how much light is hitting the camera sensor per second. The smaller the number, so 1/50, 1/25, the more time is allowed for the light to get into the camera and to hit that sensor, which makes your pictures brighter. So in photography terms, if you're wanting a picture that is freezing the moment, it's capturing everything right then and there. Let's say we're doing sports photography and you want to capture Billy playing football and you want to get everything frozen in a second. Well, what you will have to do is bring your shutter speed all the way up to 1/500, 1/1000, and that means that the shutter speed is opening and closing a lot faster, able to freeze that moment in time. On the other hand, if you want to create some motion blur, you want to get those beautiful pictures where it looks like the water is kind of continuously flowing, then you're going to go the other way. You need to go down to 1/50th and keep going down 1/25 and all the way down there in order to get those kind of photos. So that adds in motion blur. In video terms, it's kind of similar. The lower you are, the more motion blur comes in, and the higher you are, the more jittery it becomes. But in video terms, there is a sweet spot. The general rule is to double your frame rate. So let's say you are filming at 25 frames per second, you will have your shutter speed at 1/50th. For me, the safest bet that I have always done is put my camera onto 50 frames per second and have my shutter speed at 1/100. That kind of is my safe zone if I just want to run and go out and take some shots. If you are on photo, you have to choose where you want to be. So let's say a sweet spot, depending on your camera, is going to be 1/125. So remember, cup of tea, haven't forgotten about it, still here. Still hot. It's getting a bit cold actually. I've got a black cup of tea, and what do we need in my cup of tea? We need a dash of milk. So let's call our milk the aperture. The aperture is also one of the big players of letting light into the camera. So if you've ever looked into the camera lens, you can see as you're moving the swivelly thing, the ring. Whenever you move the ring around, you can sometimes see the blades inside the lens get bigger or smaller, kind of like how a cat's eye reacts to light. So not only does it let light in, but it also helps with what you can see in the frame around you. So if you want to take a shot where everything is in focus, we are on top of a mountain and we want to take a beautiful landscape. So we want everything in a landscape to be in focus. What we'll do is we will change our aperture, and we will change our aperture higher up. So we'll go up to f5, f6, f7, f8. And yes, they use Fs, is a bit confusing, but just bear with me. Aperture is the F, the middle one in your camera. If we go up to f10, that is going to make everything in focus, but it's also going to let a lot less light in, so it's going to be a lot darker. And then if we want that really dreamy, out of focus bokeh, that's what aperture does. So just as an example, we're going to use our milk as our aperture. We've got our black tea, it's very dark, I don't know if you can see it. The more milk we're going to be putting in is going to be like the lower numbers of our aperture. So right now we're at about f10. And as I pour in milk, we're going to be going lower and lower. So we're going down to f5, f4, 2.8, and then there where we've got a really milky tea, that's going to be an f1.4 and f1.8. So this is where there's going to be the most light being let into the camera, and the more dreamy background you are going to get. That's a really milky tea. Now for me, I really love that kind of out of focus bokeh look, so I'm always shooting at around 2.8, but you have to be careful making sure that the thing you want to be in focus is actually in focus. But for now, let's find that little sweet spot again and say that your f-stop should be at about 3.5, but it really depends on your situation and what you're actually shooting. And then finally, our last component for a cup of tea, sugar. I don't know about you, but I have to have some sugar in my tea because milky tea is just not my thing. Sweet milky tea on the other hand, perfecto. Our sugar is going to be ISO. ISO is the last component that we need to understand how all of our settings work in our camera. ISO is basically fake light. Imagine that in your camera there is a little light switch in there. So if you're in a dark room, what do? You switch the light on. I like to think of it as a torch inside my camera. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does to me. So it helps you if you don't have any kind of light source available, like a light or the sun. Let's say you're in a dark room and there's nothing to kind of give you any light. The ISO will help you add light to your pictures or your videos. But for ISO, there is a bit of a drawback to using it. The more ISO or the more fake light that you're putting into your picture, your settings, means the more grain is going to be coming into your pictures. And this took me so long to understand. The darker the lenses, the darker the room is, the more kind of fuzz you're gonna get. I'm gonna call it fuzz. You know that noise that you get when you see blacks, or it's just kind of like it's like when you open a soft drink and all those carbonated bubbles are bubbling everywhere, and it's definitely not what you want to show people. It's this kind of crackling, fizzly, pixelated looking video. It's awful. And it took me so long to realize that the only reason for that was that my ISO was way too high and I just didn't have a lot of light in my camera. So learn your camera and what your camera is capable of in terms of ISO, because you don't want to go too high that you start getting grain and fuzz into your pictures and into your video. Personally, I wouldn't say go above 8,000 if you can help it, unless you're on a Sony. Those are some great low light cameras that can keep going with the ISO, but for if you have a Canon or something that isn't so good in low light situations, then I would try avoid going above 8,000. Get closer to some light, find some other light sources, because your fake light isn't strong enough. So there we have it, all three different components of a camera: the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. You need to blend those all together to find that correct balance, that right balance, to get the pictures and the videos that you want and deserve, really. And it really isn't hard. It's not as crazy as we make it out to be. You just need to sit and look at your camera and play around with it a little to find those sweet spots that I was talking about. That's my favorite word of this entire video, is sweet spots. The only way you're going to get better at this, at understanding exactly what your camera is capable of, is taking everything that you are learning and going out and practicing. Go outside, find a flower, use your dog as a model, anything. It doesn't matter what you are going to be shooting, it's just that you get used to these settings. And the more you get used to these settings, the easier it's going to be and the less scary the camera is going to be. If you have any questions, remember to put them in the comment section below, and I hope you have a good day. Cheers. Do they even say cheers when you have tea? And that is the worst tea that I've ever made. I mean, I have put a lot of milk in there. If this was Aperture, this would be way over the exposed. Yeah, this